Yes, there you are. Yes.
Wonderful. Hi, I'm Anna
Sorry.
Mills. I'm a writing instructor in the San Francisco area in California. I've taught writing at community colleges since 2005, and I've written an open textbook, and I've gotten really involved in thinking about AI and writing, leading workshops, and writing about it, sharing resources, and working on AI feedback. Um, so, welcome. I'm very excited today to talk about prompting and how educators can prompt together, refining AI prompts together and collaborating deeply in this process. Um, so, this is something I've been kind of living for the last 6 months. And so, I have a lot of kind of lessons and inquiry around it that I'm excited to share. So if you're willing to share just your name and where you work and maybe your favorite workday drink, I've got my tea here, my black tea with milk and sugar. So if you want to share in the chat, that would be really nice. And I put the slides link in the chat. Um, Maybe while you're sharing, I'll just kind of give you an overview of what my plan is. So I'm going to dive in with some resources and some chance to explore them and reflect on what might be useful to you in them around prompt libraries for educators online. We're talking about chatbot prompts, ways that you can instruct AI systems to shape the output they give you. And then I'm going to go into sort of modes of deeper collaboration among educators to really improve what we can get out of AI. Individuals sharing our prompts and process publicly, team collaborations, and then sort of public, you know, webinar discussion of prompts. Um, oh, thank you. Water and orange juice. Yes. Oh, okay, great. So from AUC. Um, Welcome. Rhetoric and composition. Nice. Chai latte. Yes. Wonderful. Um, and a learning designer working in Cape Town. Wonderful. Welcome. Thanks for sharing those. Um, so I also want to say, oh, I should say that I teach at College of Marin, which is just north of San Francisco, um, in the Redwood Forest. Um, and wonderful, welcome, instructional technologist. So I wanted to say that this presentation about educators collaborating is really inspired by my collaboration with Dr. Mahabali and Dr. Lance Eaton. In 2023, we wrote an article about how open educational practices really offer a lot to educators as we try to respond to AI quickly and as it changes quickly. Um, and so the idea of sharing publicly even ideas that are rough and emerging was really key to us. And so I think the first, place to go is to look for public prompts. What are educators doing in this space? Um, so I think fundamentally, if you want to use AI for educational purposes, and I am kind of starting with the premise that we're using it, and I know, I do other workshops on the question of whether we should use it given the ethical concerns and harms. And so I I'm not going to go into that here. I come to the conclusion that we do need to use it even to understand what it can do and how it works and how students and other faculty are using it, how the landscape of work is changing. So I am kind of starting from that assumption. Um, but fundamentally, if we're using it, the question is, what instructions are we giving it? If we're working with a chatbot, or some AI system, and most ed tech companies are bringing in AI these days and sprinkling the magic fairy dust and saying, isn't it great we have AI? But they're not sharing what instructions they gave it usually. So some of these big companies like Turnitin, um, they will do things like give feedback on student papers if you pay for it, but they will not tell you what instructions they gave for how to give that feedback. What is the pedagogical approach? The same with Khan Academies, Khanmigo. Khanmigo Teacher Tools is free, and in many ways, it's an interesting way to engage with AI. But they don't tell you what instructions they gave. And so my question is, shouldn't educators be coming up with and refining those instructions and at least seeing them? So if you're in Conmigo Teacher Tools, they might give you a form to fill out if you want assistance. Say you want questions to be generated. You fill out the form about how many questions and what text they should be based on, but you don't see what philosophy is behind how do you come up with a good question, right? Um, that's in the instructions that are on the back end that are hidden from us. So, what if instead we were writing and sharing those instructions, those prompts? And just before this presentation, I saw a call for proposals from in writing studies for a prompt library. And this is coming from Anuj Gupta and Brian Gogan. It was on the listserv, and they were noting that prompts not only help determine the effectiveness of a generative AI output, but prompts also allow human writers to address and often mitigate concerns about ethics and generative AI use. So this is a way we can exercise power and shape what it is that AI gives us and mitigate some of the problems. So what if we shared these? And I think this is especially relevant and something we're already ready to do as teachers. And so Mike Caulfield, who I'm going to talk more about as an example later, um, he argues that we can shape AI according to our teaching expertise. So he points out that as these systems are able to process more complicated instructions, we can really put a lot of detail into how we shape them. We can break it down for them. And he says we can think of our prompt as a mini textbook where we describe exactly what it should do and sort of teach it to do better. Um, and he points out that we're explaining things in natural language, so that's what we do as teachers, right? And that is prompting. So he says it's a great time to be a teacher, which is interesting. So I'm just going to jump in and share these prompts. So if you're in the slide deck and you come to this slide, I can actually give you a direct link to the slide with all these links. And I'm going to give you a tour of them too. So these are the places I have found public prompts for higher education. Um, and you'll note at the bottom that there are a lot more prompt libraries for K-12 education, and some of those will be relevant to us too, for sure. So I've put a link to kind of a collection of those libraries, and one of them that is interesting. But in browsing those, I do notice things that are not quite, the tone or the approach or the situation we have in higher ed. And so I wanted to start with the ones that are aimed at higher ed. So I think I have these queued up. I will have to escape out of this. Okay, so one of them, probably the most famous collection, is from the Wharton Business School professors Ethan Malik and Lilach Malik. They have very famous AI in education sort of researchers, and they have this prompt library, which is reused in other formats by Harvard, and it's on GitHub. And but you can go in and see that they have lots of student exercises, like a tutoring prompt, and you just copy and paste all of this into any chatbot is the idea. So you would just copy it, and then you would go to right, ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini or your favorite chatbot and paste it in, and then try interacting with it as a tutor and see how it behaves. And there are a lot of different ideas for prompting in higher ed there. Another that adapts some of Ethan Malik's prompts and adds others is from Maastricht University. So you can sort of see the different purposes people would use prompting for in higher ed. So it's a way to get ideas about purposes as well as the language of the prompts. And I'm going to give you a minute to kind of browse these on your own, but I just want to show you. Jose Antonio Bowen has a collection from his book, Teaching with AI, from Johns Hopkins Press. It's a very useful book, and he shares all of the prompts, and they are many, here on this webpage. And so he has a lot of great ideas. I found this one from Vanderbilt to be really interesting because it doesn't just focus on the purposes, but the techniques. So, and it's not using technical language, but it's sort of saying you can use this approach, this move, like act as persona X to perform task Y. Cast the chatbot in a role as a gourmet chef, or as an instructional designer, or as whatever you choose. And then there are things like asking the chatbot to suggest a better version of your prompt, sort of meta prompting, ask it to verify. So this is an interesting library of kind of techniques. And so, oh yeah, I wanted to show you also these two libraries that are open. This one is from Papyrus AI, which is a project out of the University of California at Irvine. They just put all their prompts in a spreadsheet. They have tested these systematically, and you can see all the different purposes they're for. These are student-facing prompts that we could invite students to use after we explore them, sort of prompts to help a student revise their use of evidence in their writing, different kinds of feedback for different purposes at different points in the writing process. And you can just sort of copy a prompt into a chatbot and use it. Similarly, I think Yasser mentioned that yeah, Yasser, go ahead. Please. Feel free to unmute if you're able. Whenever you're able, just interrupt me. So Yasser had mentioned that I'm involved as a volunteer advisor on this app, My Essay Feedback. So it comes out of the Open Educational Resources community, and we were really committed to providing OER resources, as part of the app. And so what we did was invited instructors who used it, if they came up with their own feedback prompts that they want their students to use to ask AI for feedback on their writing. We invited instructors to say, yes, I want to make this public. I want it to be part of the prompt library. And then anyone, whether or not you're using My Essay Feedback, can browse this prompt library and use the prompts. So you can sort of filter the results by theme, like if you wanted to find something about Lit reviews, you could see nothing for literature review, but I know there's a research paper, um, prompts that are specific to giving feedback on a research paper. We would find a whole bunch of those, and you could adapt them. You could edit them, you could combine them, you could just get ideas from them. Um, so that so those are all the different libraries I wanted to get you a chance to kind of browse. Um, and the other spaces you might browse in this time that you're going to have a few minutes up ahead. These are sites where you can make custom chatbots and people can share the prompts. So, I mean, a custom chatbot sounds fancy, but it really is usually just a prompt. It's just instructions for how the chatbot should respond. When I do that, I like to share the instructions, and some platforms allow that. ChatGPT does not allow that. I at least unless they've changed very recently. But if you make a custom bot on there, you can't share what you did behind the scenes. But if you do it on PlayLab, which is a nonprofit for educators, you can see and remix other instructors' chatbots. So you can see their prompts and use their techniques and adapt their language. That's also true on Poe.com. You can choose to share your prompt. And there's an example of Mark Marino's Coach Tutor is a bot you can use for free on Poe.com, and you can see the prompt of how, he instructed it to give feedback. Um, so Well, yeah, and thank you, David. That's a great point that a custom bot might also include attachments like resources, pedagogical resources that they're asked to take into account. And so that's something beyond the prompt that can be used in a custom bot. You might have a big file, or I've attached a whole OER textbook to a custom bot and asked the bot to draw from the textbook. Um, but um, there are a lot of custom bots that don't have that. So they just are a set of instructions. Oh, thank you, Andrew. Yeah, I wasn't aware of easypeasy.ai. Very cool. As another platform for custom bots. Um, so I would love it. I want to give you sort of maybe 7 minutes now to explore these prompt libraries. Let me get to that actually. So you want to go to you can go to the direct link for the slide with so you can decide which ones you want to go to by going to this link in the chat. And then just kind of browse and see which, if any, might be useful to you. Are there techniques? Are there purposes that you hadn't thought of that you could use? And then if you would go to this poll and just answer the quick poll question on the menti.com, you can use the QR code or the link in the chat. Great. Or you can go to menti.com and type the number that Irene has just put in the chat. So let's take a few minutes, and I'm happy to kind of answer questions or chat as others are browsing. Any questions about those prompt libraries, or does anyone want to add another recommendation for where to find prompts for educators? Feel free to put that in the chat too. So we'll just take till 8:29 to browse, and I'm very curious what you'll find. I'll put up the Mentimeter results starting in about 5 minutes, and we'll kind of see as people add to it. first there's a poll that's just like, yes, no, did you find things that were useful? And then, oh, great, thank you, Maha. Yes, that AI for Education prompt library. Um, Thanks for sharing that. Um, and then there's an open-ended question on the poll as well. So it would be great to know there, like what you found that you would try. Um, or what other resources you would share, prompt tips.
Yes.
So welcome back. Um, and yeah, this is fun, neat to see the poll results on what you thought of the prompt libraries. I'm embarrassed because I always get overwhelmed almost immediately. So only one other person gets overwhelmed. That tells me, that's something about my brain. But I'm glad that 6 of 7 folks got excited. Um, and interesting that 5 folks felt likely to use a prompting technique or pattern that you hadn't before, but not so much that you saw a type of help that you hadn't considered before that you would use. So it seems like this was more useful for techniques or patterns rather than like what you would use AI for. And some really interesting comments. The question of length. Some of these prompts are so long. And we'll look at an example in a minute of a really long one. I had the same concern, and it seems that now they actually can respond to very long prompts. And um, interesting. So exploring the student exercises, creating a team charter, starting the prompt course. Okay, great. So yeah, now that's another way to approach it. There's various free prompting courses, and experiment more with supporting activities. Cool. Um, does anyone want to say anything out loud about these? Feel free to raise your hand at any point. Um, so I'm just going to go on to sort of look closely at one way of sharing that was way beyond just putting the prompt out there. This is a way that I have learned a ton about prompting over the last few months. So you might be aware of Mike Caulfield, who has a Substack. He's an information literacy person. See, I should have put his slide first. He co-wrote the book Verified, and he came up with the SIFT method for information verification, which is widely taught in higher ed, colleges, and universities. The idea of lateral reading, that you don't just look at the website as it is to see whether it's credible, but you also you stop, you investigate that source, but you also look for better coverage of the topic elsewhere. And you trace any claims to their original context. So that's a really powerful method that he came up with, and he's now applying it to he's applying that expertise to prompting. So beginning in March, he shared some 17 Substack articles about the evolution of this mega prompt that he calls the SIFT toolbox. Now he's calling it deep background. And in those Substacks, he not only shared the prompt itself, but he pulled out parts of it and explained why he had done that. He talked about how he tested it. He explained how he was updating it in post after post. and he gave examples of outputs. And his readers were testing it and commenting on the Substack and sometimes offering suggestions or troubleshooting. Um, and so this was a really kind of engaged process. So this is the very beginning of the prompt. And it does kind of look like code, but don't be put off by the hashtags. I think that's marked down, but you don't have to use that in your prompt. It's really just headings. Um, but so you can see all of his instructions. It's over 3,000 words. So it's this monster. So that was my first lesson that a long prompt could work. And later he put up this website that gives you a very easy way to copy the whole prompt. You click in this little box and you do, select all, and copy. And then you've got the prompt and you put that into a chatbot and you can try Mike Caulfield's process. So he really has revolutionary vision for this prompt that it would change the way that you use large language models. Um, and that's based on his whole approach as an educator. And you can see that in the prompt and in the posts that it's coming out of his vision, integrating his experience. And in the prompt, he's constantly talking about kind of models that he uses. So he'll tell it, when analyzing claims, apply the Toolman analysis method. And he'll explain what that means to him, right? So there's a lot of teaching in there. And it really showcases that AI can do things we didn't expect it to. If we're taking a critical perspective, which we should, we're probably aware that AI can contribute to misinformation and can undermine, the process of fact checking and reliable citation of sources. So we should have those concerns, but what he's doing here is trying to make it work in a different way to actually support verification and citation, and to help us research and closely evaluate claims and sources. Um, and so he wrote a piece about this in The Atlantic. And you really have to try it to see that. So I tried it. What he's done is a prompt that basically gives you a fact check or a background assessment on any claim you want. So it could be something controversial or kind of conspiracy theory like that it would end up debunking. Or it could be something that, I've always heard people say that when the weather changes, you're more likely to catch cold. And I know people were always saying that at my son's preschool. And I would think, I wonder if there's any basis to that. Is that a myth? And that was not something I was going to invest the time in researching, probably. But I put it into the chatbot, and oh, interesting. Maha is sharing that you tried the tool in class with students, and that students said that it said some things they wouldn't have been able to figure out on their own. That's fascinating. Yeah, I've had that feeling myself. Um, so I tried it with this chat session. So what it gives you when you put the prompt in is a big analysis. So I just put in exposure to a big change in temperature, like sudden cold snaps, can make someone more likely to catch a cold. And then it's outputting this very complex, structured analysis that includes various tables, errors, and corrections. And this is all following his very detailed instructions on how to format those tables, what to look for, how to do the analysis, what if it's uncertain, what if this, what if you get a claim of this type, how should you handle that, what to look out for, what are the pitfalls, all kinds of details. And so when I looked at the analysis, though, one thing that stands out is that there are links. right? So part of this chatbot is that it was browsing the internet and finding links and sharing those links. And then later it was assessing their credibility. So it has a whole table where it lists the sources it used and explains why it considers them credible and rates them. So my experience with this was that just I could find deeper information and I could check the claims by following up those links to credible sources like Johns Hopkins Medicine and Yale News reporting on a Yale study. Um, and this felt more accessible. And so it doesn't, what is Maha saying? It doesn't work anymore? Huh. Oh,
I'm
okay.
responding to you, so I'm responding to
Oh,
you,
I
so
see.
go
I'm
to you.
sorry. Yeah. Okay, I see. Yes. Um, so I found that I was learning prompting techniques by just looking at that mega prompt, even though I didn't read the whole thing and I wasn't, looking at every detail. But seeing those things in action and knowing that they were working and seeing the output and that it had value to me, um, felt like I was learning those techniques in a way that I really just wasn't from seeing prompting tips and web pages about prompting and posts about prompting techniques. Um, I could see that things worked. So things like when statements, like you know, when this problem happens or if this. I wasn't sure how well that would even work when I was taught that in a training in a Play Lab custom bot training. I thought, does that work? Is that research based? And so seeing another educator using it and seeing it work is maybe my favorite way to learn those techniques. And as Maha was asking about, or as somebody, I think it was Maha, was asking about, does a long prompt really work? Well, okay, I guess it does, right? Because here we see it. Um, Another thing you might read about chain of thought prompting, telling the chatbot to take it step by step or telling it what steps to follow. Um, and I could see that working here. So here are Mike Caulfield's instructions for quality assurance, telling the chatbot before submitting your response, verify that all required sections are present and properly formatted, all links are properly formatted, evidence types are properly categorized and evaluated. So, he's laying out the steps and the priorities here. And that taught me that, that I could do that too. So that was kind of the lesson of Mike Caulfield for me in short. Um, but and that was wonderful. And I took that and sort of brought it into a team collaboration process um, where we were working on a prompt. And so I want to give the example from my experience working with this peer and AI review plus reflection project, which we call PAIR. Um, so this is a collaboration among faculty from 4 public universities and 4 community colleges, 2-year colleges. We have a grant from the California Education Learning Lab to train cohorts of faculty at each of our colleges to use this method with students, to invite students to engage critically with AI feedback alongside peer feedback, to try to keep humans centered in the writing process. So we were developing this prompt that we want to share with all of our faculty and use in our research. Oh, and I'm noticing Yasser makes a good point that I kind of have been acting like, throw the prompts into any chatbot. But yes, I think it does make a difference what model you're using and which chatbot you're using, how well a particular prompt might work. Some might work fine across the board. Others, Mike Caulfield does say that he developed his prompt really for the paid version of Claude and the paid version of ChatGPT. but they kind of work in the free version. I find them to work still reasonably well. Um, so I think, yeah, but that's a good point to keep in mind that there's a question of which model. Yeah, sir. Yeah, go ahead.
I asked this because when I requested feedback on alternative text for several visuals that I have, and I was trying a new tool for that purpose called IRA or IRA, and it said, "Oh, I can provide those, but I need the paid version." And it said, you are now on the free version." And I understand I
Mm.
asked, "Do you understand my prompt?" It said, "Yes, I understand your prompt, but I can't provide the full answer because you're not on the free version." And
Uh,
that's why I asked that. And especially when it comes to feedback, the idea of feedback, when I have a paper and I'm requesting AI to give feedback, would the quality of feedback be different from the quality of feedback given by a free version? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's an important point that it might well be. And there are ways you can try to find free access to the better models. So I think right now, um, there is some limited free access on Claude and on ChatGPT and Gemini. You can get pretty close to the best models for free, but yeah, I mean, that's constantly changing as far as what they offer. And sometimes there's an issue with, sometimes you can't get as good a result. It's true. Um, so just to share a little bit about our collaboration process. So we were working on this feedback prompt, and this was a way we collaborated as educators with different backgrounds, different kinds of students teaching different kinds of classes. And we basically kept a Google Doc of lots of prompt versions. And we were commenting on each other's prompts. We were mentioning each other, suggesting changes. Um, and I was kind of the point person, and I tried to incorporate elements of multiple people's approaches into one version. We were testing these prompts in a spreadsheet and rating the results. So we would list like what model of AI we used, as Yasser mentions. That did make a big difference for us. When we switched to GPT 4.1, we got better results. And we were making notes on the results and which kinds of essays we tested it on, etc. And then we were trying to bring in other pedagogical expertise. We had linguistic justice and equity consultants who were really wonderful, who tested our prompt, who shared their prompts, who shared materials like a checklist for students that we could then sort of incorporate into the prompt, elements of that. And I was using Claude to research, what public, credible sources are there on feedback best practices that I might want to incorporate, examples of good feedback, all these kinds of things to bring into the prompt. And using AI for help with prompting, what should the prompt say to get more of this kind of result? I used learnprompting.org for techniques to get new strategies. So, this was sort of, another element of the collaboration, I guess. And this was really important because I had the tendency to get really excited about as the prompt evolved and think it was like the best prompt ever. And especially because I was using AI to get me ideas for the prompt, I would say, well, how about this new version? And it would say, that's wonderful. It addresses this and this issue so well, and blah, blah, blah. But I needed my colleagues because they would say, wait, this is really too long. Or I tested it and it really missed the important feedback that my student needed. Um, and so, that tension, that pushback from colleagues was really important. And my colleague Marit MacArthur came up with an alternative prompt. And we realized that, maybe we wouldn't find one prompt that would work for everyone, but we wanted to offer instructors some choice. So it really took, though, more than even our team collaboration, a public collaboration to take us to another level. Um, so we had already planned a public webinar to share our materials as OER. And so we decided, instead of saying, here is our fabulous tested prompt, go use it, we said, here are two prompts. What do you think of the differences between them? And we shared the text of both prompts and we explained the approaches. And then we asked people to read two contrasting samples of feedback and comment. And it was really interesting that we had about a third of the people preferred the first prompt that we had developed together that was very long, and about 2/3 preferred the second one. And you know, many people felt like they would want to use the prompts in some form or adapt them. But they gave us really useful feedback. So some just said, and I won't read all of this because of time. I want there to be some time for questions. But the gist was that some of them really liked prompt one feedback, but it was too long and confusing, and it would be hard for students to take in. One person called it floofier, which I loved. And but they liked the tone. The tone seemed warmer and less judgmental. So all the work we had done on linguistic justice and equity felt like it had done something. But yet there were still these problems. And we really needed that larger participation. We had, 44 people filling out that poll. And that's what got us to make some bigger changes. We had thought we were done with these prompts, and but I realized after all that feedback that it really was too long, and it had to cut it back. And maybe some of those fancy prompt engineering techniques were not really worth all the text that they brought in. And so my colleague Valerie Turner and I worked on simplifying the prompt, and Marit MacArthur worked on making the second prompt warmer, more encouraging. And we tested and revised further, and we are still testing. We're almost there to where we're going to share the prompts with our instructors. But we're going to keep sharing and keep iterating, because we realized in this process that you don't come to one perfect prompt. That it makes sense to share a library of prompts and to let educators choose and adapt their own, and we'll continue to take input. And the good thing about this is it's not just for us taking that input, it's everybody else can use and adapt these prompts anytime. And so we have folks like Jason Gulia. Right after the webinar, he wrote about how he's adapting the approach. And we have had a lot of visits to our Google Doc of all our materials. And we're hoping people will participate in our Google group to share how they're adapting the process and the prompts. So just to recap, I'm making the argument that there's a lot of benefit in making the prompts that we use in education public and collaborating on them through kind of ongoing dialogue and testing and sharing our processes, both as individuals on social media, but also in teams and through public forums. And ultimately, my hope is this helps us build a sense of power in relation to AI as educators. So we build our own expertise in AI and what kinds of outputs are possible. And we're shaping how AI is used in education as we shape these instructions that we give it. And I feel like this, we don't have to feel alone interacting with the machine or dependent on the EdTech black box. We can sort of have a social and collaborative process around shaping our use of AI. in terms of prompting, as well as in other ways too. Um, so that is my argument, my case, and I would love to hear questions, comments, suggestions. I'm catching up on the chat here. Um, oh, great. Yes, Yasser, go ahead.
I loved yet the iteration process that you went through with regards to, taking the same prompt, improving it as many times as you want, not getting bored from like the same idea. One thing that I can even talk about here is last week when I've done a session here with Mark Marino on the
Mhm.
alternative text that is
Mhm.
generated by AI versus humans. And I focused on testing on a feature that is available within an app for accessibility. It's called Be My AI, and I focused on that. And because I use it a lot, the app knows my history, kind of knows that I'm Egyptian. It knows I don't know, maybe it knows my location, maybe it has access to my contacts through phone, and because it's
Oh,
available on phone, it's handy. So yeah, we can talk about privacy a lot here, but the take that I want to mention here is related to Mark's prompting. And when Marx asked the AI bots, be it ChatGPT, and I recall he asked Claude, it had a general vague description of the photo, and then the photo was of Maha and Mia in this imagine center in New York, and a
mm,
circle, sorry. And Marx said in the prompt that I'm interested in the geography of the people. Then the AI was so blunt enough to say that a Middle Eastern woman and an American woman would, even without knowing who is there, and it said hijab is there, like a veil, woman's veil,
oh.
and it said like an a more likely American woman of Asian descent, and I was like,
Hmm.
the same iteration that we do, just reiterating what happens when we highlight the specific emphasis to
Mm.
AI would just sometimes lead to bias. Yes, it
Uh,
might be beneficial in giving feedback, saying, oh, focus on coherence when it comes to writing. Focus on coherence and focus on on grammar or structure. But sometimes it might lead to something that we wouldn't want to hear from an AI. But I don't know what's your take on that.
I think that's a really good example of how testing could be helpful in uncovering problems like that, and hopefully, then trying different ways to mitigate that. Trying something in the prompt that's like, do not make assumptions based on such and such, giving it even the example of what went wrong with that prompt, and saying, for example, if you see X, don't assume Y. Um, you know, so I think the uncovering that bias, we could just stop there and say AI is biased, let's throw it out, but we could also try to think about how to instruct it so that it doesn't do that. Um, yeah, Maha, yeah, go ahead, please.
But Anna, the part about instructing the AI not to do certain biases means you already know these biases.
Right.
The
Yeah.
problem is with unconscious bias that we have and the AI has, and we won't realize that's going on. That's the
That's
problem. So I guess if we're giving students a custom bot that we can prompt that, but students themselves using AI on their own, they
hmm
will only be able to instruct it about biases that they know of.
Yeah. And I guess part of this approach is to say, maybe in some cases it makes sense to give them the prompt, the custom chat bot that already has our guidance built in and sort of the harm mitigation built into the prompt. After we've done that testing, we've uncovered some of those problems. We're never going to address it fully or anticipate everything, but maybe there's some value in that process and in giving students that prompt, because then they see that AI doesn't have to be this other way. It can work in these ways that we've shaped according to our values and our pedagogical vision. I don't know. So I know we're close to time, but I did want to thank you, Lila, for sharing that you had tried the pair approach, and using Perplexity Pro. I'm very curious how that went. And any other last thoughts or comments or questions about prompting? Okay, I see Andrew is sharing.
I was just intrigued that that some people had created sort of 2 or 3 chatbots to do different roles, and they had quite different or slightly different prompts. And I was just intrigued how well they worked, because it's having an enormously long prompt is challenging.
Yeah, I think I've seen both approaches. You can have one long prompt that says, if they ask for this, then do this, and have all the different situations within one. And I think increasingly that does work to have the long prompt. If you're using a custom bot platform, you can hide that long prompt so that, like if you're using Playlab, which I put a link to if you want to try in the slides, then the student just sees the chatbot interface and whatever description of the chatbot you put. They don't see the long prompt. They don't have to copy and paste it. So you can have a really long, complex one that covers different situations, which might be easier than sharing different links for different situations. But you can do it either way. Maybe you want students to reflect on which one they need at that moment for their own metacognitive awareness. So yeah, I could see both approaches. Oh, thank you, Maha, for sharing that. Your article on pair and other innovations. Yeah, I'm looking forward to reading that. Building teacher confidence. I love that. Yeah, I think a big part of the value of all this to me is confidence, because I think that there's a lot of cognitive overwhelm and sense of intimidation around technical approaches to AI and the idea of prompt engineering. And so I think when we're just sharing and trying things and seeing other educators do that, that's just really energizing to me and confidence building. We should be bold in this space because we do have the expertise to do this well. And, I don't trust what, OpenAI and Anthropic, they have their education teams and they're coming up with their EDU versions that they're trying to sell. And those include prompts. And I'm always like, well, who wrote those prompts? And why don't we get to see them? Let's write our own. And let's share them and reflect on them and talk about them and iterate. So that's my case. That's my soapbox. But any last comments or questions? And I know it would be great to get your feedback. I think Yasser shared the feedback form link. So I'm actually doing another session on pair specifically and how to use that approach tomorrow at the same time with my colleague Julie Gamberg. So if you want to come back for that, that'd be wonderful. We'll be going through the actual prompts and giving you a chance to test them and comment on them, and also look at what questions we ask the students to reflect on, and other materials too. Thank you for coming. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Anna, for that very insightful session. I really enjoyed that. Thank you so much. I'm going to stop the recording
Thank
now.
you. Okay.